The skill of coding, the patience, the perseverance, the ability to come up with a solution from scratch, they're losing that.
How are we going to reimagine our relationship with technology? We just had this excitement about technology, and it came from Silicon Valley, from the US largely, of this idea of technology solving and fixing everything and being almost a religion.
Which is why I believe that the idea of I don't need to train my coding skills because we now have AI is like I don't need to learn how to swim because we have boats. Welcome, Caitlin, to the podcast. I've been looking forward very much to have you here. We're going to talk about skills atrophy, about people losing, essential skills because they overuse AI. And I'm especially interested in your view because I'm a tech guy, knowing nothing about sociology. You're the exact opposite. So would you please introduce the audience to yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me, Rob. It's great to be here in Amsterdam tomorrow for World Summit AI. I'm speaking on a panel about best business value for AI, and you're going to be speaking about your children's book. And really, a little bit about me is that I focus my work around designing a socio-technical future. And what exactly does that mean? It's really about looking at our future as something that can be around combining people and technology for joint optimization and having people and technology work together and not overemphasizing the technical at the expense of the social. And this is especially important amidst technological modernity, amidst this time of rapid change with AI and the acceleration of communication and digital means and technological influences in our everyday life. And I founded Authentic Social when I was a senior at Harvard as a result of my undergraduate thesis on digital communication. And I've been going full-time for over 8 years now and have offices in New York and Amsterdam and speak around the US and Europe around these topics and do corresponding workshops related to socio-technical selling, people operations, and everything around this designing a socio-technical future.
Thank you. And you're traveling all over the place because people want to hear about this.
Yeah.
And you come to this topic from a very different direction than I come from. I work for Software Improvement Group. Yeah. So we look at the quality of software systems and the quality of software engineering. So we look at people. Yeah. We look at code, but we also look at people. And we're interested in how to make them create the best code. And for that, they need to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And recently, they have been enabled by AI to create code, to let AI generate the code, to let AI explain code, create code for them, and it will make them more productive. But what we notice is that they are relying too much on this technology. And what they're creating is a situation where they are no longer coding, but reviewing the code, which means that the skill of coding, the patience, the perseverance, the ability to come up with a solution from scratch, they're losing that. And they need the ability to code to change what the AI produces. And the problem is that for changing that the AI produces, that will be necessary for a long time to come. And the idea that many of the engineers have is that that's not the case. They believe that very soon AI will create perfect code and they will no longer, need to code. They can just review and will all be great and perfect. And that's not the case. And I wonder what makes them think that it's going to be perfect?
That's a really interesting question. And when we were discussing this topic a few weeks ago, I immediately thought of Caroline Bassett's book, Anti-Computing. She is a professor at Cambridge and speaks a lot about dissent and different ways of looking at the technological. And one thing that she speaks about is this idea of cultural neoteny and thinking about the world before us, the world before this technological now has become unthinkable. And as a result of that, we are really in this mode of thinking about everything as a preset option. And that's what you were saying. This issue of not being able to come up with a solution from scratch, that's the issue with that's an issue directly related to cultural neoteny as a result of technology and the acceleration of things. And this idea of perfection is if we think of everything as a preset option and not of how we can come up with a solution from scratch, how can we really ideate, create, and up-level ourselves from a business perspective? And to touch on the idea of perfection as it relates to technology, really the history of that comes from Silicon Valley. And I've done some media archaeological and ethnomethodological work. So what that looks like is really digging deep into out-of-print technology magazines from over 9 decades, and also looking at everyday technology habits. And looking at these out-of-print technology magazines from over 9 decades, what it's been really clear is that the message being peddled to us was that technology will smooth and fix everything, and that we are in complete control. And any of the issues that we face today around the algorithmization of everyday life, the mental health issues that may come from the overuse of technology, or the business outcomes that may result from an overuse of technology, they really weren't considered in media. We just had this excitement about technology, and it came from Silicon Valley, from the US largely, of this idea of technology solving and fixing everything, and being almost a religion, this techno-capitalism as a sort of way to solve and smooth and fix everything. And the reality is in our world is that what goes up must come down, and things are not perfect in this world, and technology does not smooth and fix everything. It fixes and accelerates a lot of areas of life in positive ways, but we have to figure out ways to counteract that. And that's where this socio-technical perspective comes in, because if we want to avoid this skills atrophy and this marching toward this technocratic imaginary, thinking that technology is going to smooth and fix everything, and then losing that creative bit that makes us human, then we need to look at things from that socio-technical perspective.
Yeah, so we're blinded, in fact, by the promise, and we want to believe it because it also, the whole automation takes away some of the sort of stupid work.
Yeah.
We feel we're in a new phase. We don't need to do stupid work anymore, and we want to believe that. And then we figure, well, AI is probably going to fix some of the hallucination problems that it currently has. And that's not going to be the case.
No.
It's well documented that bigger models are not going to solve the hallucination problem. I mean, AI models, they guess, which means that sometimes they are wrong and sometimes they are right. And because they're right, they're the great opportunity. Because they're wrong, well, we have to do something about it. And if it's about code, it can result in all kinds of issues that you overlook and things that you need to fix. And typically, if you generate code using AI, you need to fix a couple of things. And in order to fix, you need to code. And because you haven't been practicing that coding skill, you're not able to do so. And that's a downward spiral. And currently, it's a bleeding edge problem on how to solve this.
Yeah.
My next question to you is, what are ways for us to address this? Will convincing workers, software engineers, on their, mistake or view, will it help them see things in a different light and sort of take a step back with the technology?
I see this as a spectrum. My podcast and a lot of my work centers around this idea around progression to analog and reimagining our idea of what progress looks like, and looking at analog and human-based realities as a way to supplement technology and technological-based realities. Now, someone in Silicon Valley may look at analog methods and they may think that is completely inefficient and I don't want any part of that reality in their life. Okay, well, that's the way that some people are in this technological modernity. However, I think that a large group of people are hitting this point where technology has overtaken a lot of parts of life, and we've seen inefficiencies where technology can become a nuisance from a public perspective. We might be on the subway or on the train and hear people blasting their phones without headphones, people addicted to their screens, people bumping into people, into each other on the street. You may have a conversation with someone or a meeting with someone, and someone might be getting a ping, ping, ping and overtaking our brains. How can we find that balance? It really is about this looking at what analog methods can be supplemented with technology to bring in to fuse so that the technology can serve its true purpose. And it also is important to consider what AI is and what AI isn't. And that's a big piece of this. And I think something that people miss is they think that AI is something that is going to smooth and fix everything. But what it really is something to augment you. And an analogy I like to give is that think about generative AI as a consultant that you hire to help you with your everyday life. Now, if you hired an actual person to help you with your everyday life, would you think that within 5 minutes that person would be able to solve and fix every issue in your life, whether that be personal or professional? No. But we, as a society, global society, tend to think that technology can solve and fix everything. I mean, I've traveled a lot around the US and Europe and spoken with a lot of different people. And sure, there's more extreme cases of this in the US, but really a lot of places, people think that instantly we should be able to get some type of fix from artificial intelligence. But that's not the case. It's only as good as its inputs. And hallucinations, to your point, are very prevalent. I mean, just the other day, I was asking GPT, and I always anthropomorphize it and say I'm asking it like it's a person, but I digress.
Sure.
I said, can you come up with some studies around socio-technical system strategy for this example? Because I wanted to see if it could supplement some Google Scholar elements. It generated some studies, including one from McKinsey. I looked up, they just were not real, hallucinated. It's happened 4 or 5 other times in the last week or so, and I've only picked them up because this is my area of expertise and work. What worries me is this idea of what's true is beginning to shift with humanity. A big example of this in the past was Google. So we use it as a verb. We say, I Google it, and we really largely, if we Google something and it's on the front page, we regard it as true, passively, because it's a lot of work for our brain to go and fact check all these different things. My worry is that that's one thing. The acceleration of things with artificial intelligence and how, with the United States and unfettered capitalistic interests, there have been really no guardrails on this. What are some dangers that can happen, on an individual level, but also on an organizational level from this skills atrophy? Because it is, for some organizations and individuals, being regarded incorrectly, in my professional opinion, as this magic pill.
Yeah. And we want to believe it's a magic pill. And sometimes it presents itself as a magic pill, coming across really certain about topics, and gives us the wrong impression and makes us believe that it's perfect. The solution is therefore not in convincing engineers that it's not perfect, because they will keep on trying, and they will keep on then working with incorrect output and trying to fix it. Still, that will not bring them to a level of involvement that will keep them maintaining their skills. So I think the solution is into forcefully create a situation where they can work more productively, but they have to use the AI in a more restricted level of autonomy, and they're involved more in the process. And that sounds like a really stupid idea, but we see this in self-driving cars. As you know, fully autonomous self-driving cars are not a reality right now. So our option could be to have an almost perfect car, which we currently can make, and let people drive in it. And that would create a situation where they are behind the wheel, just checking everything is going well. And then if something's not going well, they can intervene and take over. I think it's the same with software engineering.
Yeah.
Because if you would be looking at code generated by AI and just to check if something's wrong, you get fatigued, just like you would be in a car that almost does everything right, but sometimes does something very wrong. You overlook things because you're looking in your newspaper or you're scrolling on your phone, talking about technology, and the car is creating an accident. And if you do spot it, then you need the skills to intervene. And at that moment, you haven't trained these skills, which is why we, as humanity, decided to set some rules as to the level of involvement that we require from drivers in a car in order to stay vigilant, but also to maintain the skills. And maybe at some point, cars will be able to drive autonomously, and maybe in a couple of years. But with AI creating perfect code, that's going to take much, much longer, which is why I believe that the idea of I don't need to train my coding skills because we now have AI is like I don't need to learn how to swim because we have boats, right? It's handy that we have boats, and the problem is that at some point you will be left on your own in the water, and you need to be able how to swim. How are we going to make that happen without the engineers and other people working with AI finding ways around it? I don't know. What's your experience in creating in changing this behavior, this tendency of people to rely too much on technology. Maybe, for example, in the use of mobile phones, what type of enforcement works the best, and can we then perhaps apply that in the situation of software engineers that we want to tone down the use of AI with?
Yeah, well, for anyone listening, a great place to start with this for additional resources is a book called Guardrails, Guiding Human Decisions in the Age of AI by Victor Meyer-Schoenberger and Urs Gasser. What Urs and Victor speak about in their book Guardrails, and I've interviewed Victor for my podcast Progression to Analog and met Urs and gone to his book talk and read this book in its entirety and marked it up, so I'm not just referencing one line of it. It's a really important book for people to read around reimagining how we look at decision-making in this age of AI. And what they say is that we're no longer in an age of network governance nor data governance, but really an age of decision governance and looking at how we can create guardrails to make better decisions in this age. And so that's an important piece of it. I also think that, coming at least from an American perspective, I have little to no faith in at least the United States government in creating effective regulations on a macro scale for these guardrails. So a lot of what this is going to look like is on an organizational level and an individual level, how are we going to reimagine our relationship with technology? And I think that starts with starting to realize the influence of hyper-communicative practices or the excess of inbound and outbound communication precipitated by technology. We have 7 times the amount of conversation streams available to us than just a few decades ago, and the same amount of time. And people on average spend anywhere from 3 to 6 hours a day on asynchronous communication or communication that exists outside of a steady stream. So if so much of our day is already clogged with notifications and technologies and ping, 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 well, how are we supposed to up-level our lives in this way that Silicon Valley has imagined us to with artificial intelligence or with other technologies if we don't even have the time to think? That's what I look at. So we speak a lot about all these ideas in really macro level terms, but what I've seen in my work with Authentic Social, and I've helped sales teams increase lead generation by 34% quarter over quarter and reduce voluntary attrition by over 65% year over year. And a lot of this has to do with multiple factors, but it's this socio-technical approach to AI adoption and to making sure that skills atrophy is something that is brought up and set and from an education perspective. Okay, we're approaching AI from this socio-technical perspective. This is a risk. Bring it up to people, because that idea of object permanence, people can then realize that, okay, the human level is important. But it really starts at that baseline level of how can we reduce hyper-communicative practices within the workplace, create some open space to ideate and create leveraging AI, then look at what within the workflow needs to be improved from an AI perspective. So you're not getting internal advertisements or hearing about a product that might be good. You know that for your workflow, this needs to be solved, and finding something for that, figuring out what needs to be done on the macro level and the micro level, and doing constant checks. That's what's really important, is these safety checks, these guardrails, this education-forward approach to this socio-technical AI adoption. Because this isn't something that people can just learn once and forget about. It's something that's always changing. And so making sure people understand, hey, what's difficult about AI adoption? And having candid and honest and direct conversations. What's working? What's not working? What are you scared of with AI adoption? What are you excited about? Those conversations, while to some may seem trivial, really I've seen impact the long-term of companies' abilities to have sticky change as it pertains to AI.
Wow. Yeah, so you've given me a lot of pointers on how to go ahead and come up with some best practices in applying AI in software engineering. First of all, it's about better understanding what AI is. So countering some of those over-reliance ideas, so that the AI is going to be perfect, by being factual and pointing people to the fact that hallucinations are not going away and their skill of coding will be needed. This is an existential thing for developers, because they will realize, oh wow, if I'm not going to be maintaining my skills, I will not be relevant at some point.
Yeah.
So that will motivate them. Then second, it is about removing the noise, is
Sure.
how I would summarize it. You know, all the stimuli that developers get with the notifications and the different things that they need to take into account. Especially developers need almost hyper focus to get their work done. And if we don't create that focus, we cannot even expect them to do coding
Exactly.
and learn from it. So that's sort of a prerequisite for
Yeah.
achieving responsible use of AI. And then looking at sensible guardrails that are based on their workflow, how they work. Part of it is when they need to solve a problem is the problem analysis, and then going towards a solution and then coding the solution. What we want is their close involvement in some of these steps where their creativity is the most important.
Exactly.
And where they can apply the things that they learned, in university or whatever, but also the things that they learned that are important for the organization that they work for, so they can apply it, like certain quality standards. And then elegantly providing them with a workflow where they feel that they can provide value, and the stuff that they indeed find boring is done by AI instead of doing a sort of big bang AI approach and say, solve this problem
Yeah.
for me, and then
Yeah.
work with the code that you get.
Yeah.
Because that's, of course, very addictive even, because
Yeah.
it seems so easy. But on the long term, it is not. And if we provide them with the tools and the workflow that allow for this augmentation built on the best interaction that we'll first need to figure out together.
Yeah.
Those are the contours, I think, of a solution. Thank you very much for that.
Definitely. AI-driven change is such a back and forth and involves so much intentionality. And that's what I think we need to keep remembering, is that it's not a quick fix. And skills atrophy is a real risk at any point of AI-driven change. And keeping that awareness and keeping that education forward perspective is incredibly important.
Those were the best final words of this podcast I could have imagined. So let's keep it at that. Thank you very much for joining, and let's have a great World Summit tomorrow and the day after.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks so much.